The ship landed slowly on the alien world, its engines humming like a giant beast ready to sleep. Jack stood near the exit ramp, staring at the glowing horizon. The sky here was not blue like Earth, but a deep shade of violet, and the air carried a strange electric feeling that made the hairs on his arms stand up. He was told this would be a simple ceremony, just an initiation. But as the doors opened and the bright light flooded in, he felt a weight on his chest. He could not explain. The first thing he noticed was the crowd. Hundreds of tall alien figures stood in perfect rows outside the landing zone, their glowing amber eyes locked on him. None of them spoke, yet he could feel the pressure of their gaze. They were dressed in silver robes that shimmered as the wind moved, and each one held a long staff tipped with a crystal that pulsed with soft light. Jack hesitated at the top of the ramp, wondering why so many had gathered just for one man's. A voice came from behind him. "Step forward, human," said the escort assigned to guide him. A pale-skinned alien warrior whose armor looked older than any technology Jack had ever seen. "The council waits." Jack nodded and stepped down the ramp. The ground was smooth and black like polished stone, but it felt warm under his boots. The air was filled with the low hum of alien chants, not loud but rhythmic, echoing from the crowd in waves. He did not understand the words, yet they sent a shiver down his spine. This was no casual welcome, and a small part of him began to worry about what would happen next. He was led through the rows of aliens, their eyes following every step. No one smiled, no one moved. Jack tried to tell himself it was just tradition, but the silence felt heavier with each passing second. In the distance, a massive structure rose from the ground like a mountain of crystal. Its walls glowed with blue veins of energy, and the closer they came, the louder the chants became. Jack's heart started to race when they reached the entrance. Two alien guards stepped aside, crossing their staffs as a sign of respect. The warrior escort pushed open the tall doors, and a rush of warm air escaped from inside. Now Jack entered the hall and was struck by the scale of it. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow, and the walls were lined with banners depicting alien symbols he did not recognize. Hundreds more aliens filled the chamber, standing silently, their eyes locked on him like predators observing prey. At the far end of the hall sat the council. 7 figures in golden robes sat on thrones carved from shining crystal, each one larger and more intimidating than the last. Their faces were hidden by masks, shaped like fierce animals. The center figure raised a hand, and the room fell into complete silence. Jack felt his breath catch. He wanted to speak, to ask what this ceremony was really about, but the weight of the moment kept him silent. The central council member rose and stepped forward, their robe flowing like liquid gold. In a voice deep and commanding, they spoke in a language Jack could barely understand, but the warrior at his side translated. "Quickly, human, you have arrived at the hour marked by the stars. You will stand before the trials. You'll be judged trials," Jack whispered. He thought this was a welcome, some formality where he would nod and sign a paper, but now his stomach twisted. He glanced at the warrior. "I was told this was just initiation." The alien's expression did not change. "The initiation is the trials," the warrior said. "Or not fail," before Jack could respond. 2 guards grabbed his arms and led him to the center of the hall. A wide circle was carved into the floor, filled with glowing symbols. As he stepped inside, the air felt heavier, almost alive. He heard the council chanting in unison, their voices blending into the low hum of energy rising from the floor. The symbols around his feet began to glow brighter, and suddenly, a wall of light erupted around him, sealing him inside the circle. Heart pounded as he looked around. The wall of light was like solid glass, impossible to break. The crowd outside stared at him with unreadable expressions. Then the central council member raised a staff, and a loud crack echoed through the hall. A massive door at the side of the chamber opened slowly, and a shadow stepped out. Jack could not see clearly at first, but then the creature emerged into the light. It was twice his height, covered in thick black scales, and its glowing yellow eyes locked on him with hunger. A chain snapped as the beast roared, shaking the ground beneath him. Jack stumbled back, panic clawing at his chest. The warrior's voice echoed faintly from beyond the wall of light. "Survive, human. Prove your worth." Jack clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had no weapon, no plan, and no idea what was going on. All he knew was that this was no formality, and if he failed whatever this was, he would not be leaving this alien hull alive. The beast roared again, a sound so deep it felt like the ground itself was trembling. Jack stepped back, his eyes darting around the glowing circle that trapped him. There was no way out, no weapon to fight with, nothing but his bare hands. His throat was dry, and his heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. The creature lowered its head and charged. Jack moved on instinct, diving to the side just as the beast's massive claws tore through the floor where he had been standing. The impact shook the entire chamber, and the alien crowd gasped softly. Their glowing eyes locked on the human who was now scrambling to his feet. Jack looked around desperately. He needed an advantage, anything, but all he saw was empty space. And the towering wall of light around him, the council watched in silence from their thrones, their golden masks expressionless. The central figure raised their staff again, and glowing lines appeared in the floor. Suddenly, pillars of stone shot up from beneath the ground, creating obstacles between Jack and the beast. He realized it was part of the trial, but he didn't know if it was meant to help him or kill him faster. The beast lunged again, its claws scraping against the new pillars as it tried to reach him. Jack ran, weaving through the stone columns, using them as cover. He had no plan except to keep moving. He could hear the creature behind him, its breathing heavy and hot like fire. And he knew it would catch him if he slowed down for even a second. Then he spotted something. One of the pillars was cracked near its base, glowing faintly like the floor symbols. Jack didn't know why, but his instincts screamed that it was important. He sprinted toward it, dodging the beast's snapping jaws by inches. As he reached the cracked pillar, he pushed with all his strength. It didn't budge. He tried again, gritting his teeth, shoving with his shoulder. The beast was almost on him now, its roar deafening as it closed the distance. At the last possible moment, Jack leaped aside. The beast's massive body slammed into the cracked pillar, and the stone shattered with a flash of light. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena, knocking Jack to the ground. He coughed and pushed himself up, his ears ringing. The beast howled in pain as pieces of the broken pillar fell on its back, but it was far from dead. Its glowing yellow eyes burned. Brighter with rage, Jack stumbled to his feet. He had heard it, but only a little. He needed another way, something more. He scanned the arena again and noticed the other pillars had similar glowing cracks. The trial wasn't about killing the beast with his hands, he realized. It was about using the arena itself. The creature charged again, and Jack sprinted toward another cracked pillar. He shouted and waved his arms, trying to draw the beast's attention. The creature roared and followed him blindly, its claws tearing deep scars into the stone floor. At the last second, Jack rolled away, and the beast's massive head smashed into the second pillar. Another explosion of light rocked the arena, and this time the beast stumbled. Blood dripping from its mouth, the crowd murmured now, their voices low but excited. Jack didn't understand their language, but he could tell they were surprised. Maybe they didn't think a human would last this long. He didn't have time to think about it. He ran again, heading for the third pillar, his lungs burning, sweat pouring down his face. The beast was slower now, but still deadly. It roared in frustration as it followed him. Jack reached the third pillar and used the same trick. At the last moment, he dropped to the ground and rolled aside. The beast struck the pillar full force, and the glowing stone cracked apart. The shockwave threw Jack across the arena, and he hit the wall of light hard enough to see stars. He groaned, trying to stand, but his body screamed in pain. The beast lay in the rubble, twitching, its breath ragged. Jack wanted to collapse, to just lie there and catch his breath, but he knew the trial wasn't over. The creature slowly pushed itself up, its eyes glowing faintly now. It was weak, but it wasn't dead. Jack gritted his teeth and forced himself to move. There was one pillar left. He staggered toward it, the sound of the beast's claws scraping on the floor growing closer behind him. His legs felt like lead and his vision blurred, but he didn't stop. The pillar was only a few feet away when the beast roared and lunged. Jack had no strength left to dodge. At the last second, he grabbed a jagged piece of stone from the ground and swung with everything he had. Smashing it into the cracked part of the final pillar, the pillar exploded in a blinding flash, and the arena shook violently.
The wall of
Light around him flickered and vanished as the beast collapsed with a final roar. Jack lay on the ground gasping for air, his body aching from head to toe. The crowd erupted in a loud, echoing chant, their voices filling the massive hall. He looked up and saw the council rising from their thrones, their golden masks turned. Toward him the central figure stepped forward and raised their staff high. "The human has survived the first trial," the warrior escort translated, his voice echoing over the chants. "He will continue." Jack pushed himself to his knees, barely able to stand, but his mind was already spinning. First trial, he thought. How many more were there, and what would happen if he failed the next one? Jack's legs shook as he stood, his body sore and heavy. The creature's body lay motionless behind him. Black scales shattered, and glowing faintly with leftover energy from the pillar's destruction. He wanted to collapse and breathe, but the alien crowd was already silent again, watching with those unblinking, glowing eyes. There was no applause, no comfort. Only judgment. The council at the far end of the massive hall rose from their thrones together. Their golden robes shimmered. In the torchlight as they stepped forward, the central figure, taller and more imposing than the rest, lifted the glowing staff. Jack felt his stomach turn, wondering what could come next. The warrior escort approached him, calm and unreadable as ever. "You have survived," he said, his voice low. "Few outsiders do." "But your trials are not finished," Jack nodded weakly. Not because he accepted it, but because he had no strength to argue. "How many trials?" he asked, but the warrior only looked away, as if the answer was something he was not allowed to share. Sharp sound echoed across the hall as the central council figure tapped the staff on the floor. The glowing symbols in the arena's floor flared to life again, and the crowd began chanting in rhythm. This time, Jack noticed the words carried a tone of anticipation, almost celebration. He looked around, confused, until a new door opened at the back of the chamber. A soft light spilled into the room, and a shadow appeared in the doorway. Figure stepped forward slowly. Jack blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. It wasn't another beast. It was a person, smaller than the towering aliens around them. Woman. She wore a silver veil over her face, and a flowing gown made of shimmering threads that looked as delicate as mist. Her steps were silent on the polished floor, and as she approached, the crowd lowered their heads slightly in reverence. Breath caught. She stopped just a few feet from him, and for the first time, he could see her face as she reached up and removed the veil. She was alien, yes, but not like the others. Her features were softer, her eyes large and glowing with a pale blue light. Small lines of bioluminescence traced her cheeks, pulsing faintly with her heartbeat. She looked younger than the other aliens, fragile even. And yet there was a quiet strength in her gaze. The warrior stepped close to Jack and whispered, "She is the bond gift." Jack frowned.
What? The what?
Before he could get an answer, the central council figure spoke, their voice deep and commanding. "What?" The warrior translated again, his words sharp and final. "You have proven your worth in battle. Now you must accept the bond."
Ow.
"This is our tradition, and it cannot be refused." Jack's heart pounded in his ears. "Bond, what does that even mean?" The warrior's expression did not change. "Marriage," he said simply, "to be joined to her." "She is the daughter of the council leader." Jack took a step back, his mouth dry. "Wait, know this. Has to be a mistake." "I never agreed to anything like this." The warrior tilted his head slightly. "You entered the initiation of your own will. You stepped into our trials. A refusal now is dishonor. It would mean death, for both you and the bond gift." Jack stared at the woman in front of him. She stood still, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes lowered respectfully. She didn't look angry or afraid, only quiet. He felt a sharp twist of guilt in his chest. She had no choice in this either. The council leader approached and held out the staff toward Jack. The glowing tip pointed to the young alien woman, then back to him. The meaning was clear. Jack felt the weight of every eye in the chamber pressing down on him, waiting for his decision. He wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but the warrior's words echoed in his head. Death for both you and her. Jack's fists clenched. He wasn't ready for this. Not now, not ever. But he couldn't be the reason someone else died. He stepped forward slowly, and the chants of the crowd grew louder. The young woman lifted her head, and their eyes met. There was no hatred there, no blame, only a silent question: would he accept her? Jack swallowed hard and nodded once. Her lips parted slightly in surprise, but she said nothing. The council leader lowered the staff, satisfied, and the chants reached a fever pitch to alien attendants approached, carrying a glowing band made of energy threads. They wrapped it gently around Jack's wrist, then the woman's. The band tightened, merging into their skin until it disappeared completely. Jack felt a sudden warmth spread up his arm and into his chest, a pulse that matched hers. It wasn't painful, but it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The bond is complete, the warrior announced.
Ow.
From this moment, you are united. You are husband and wife. Jack stood frozen, still trying to process what had just happened. The woman stepped closer and whispered softly, her voice melodic and strange. He didn't understand her words, but there was a gentleness in her tone that eased some of his fear. The council leader stepped back and gestured to the attendants. Take them to their quarters, the warrior translated. Their life together begins now. Jack didn't resist as the attendants guided him and his new alien wife out of the hall. He glanced at her again. She walked gracefully beside him, her hands folded, her glowing eyes flicking up to meet his briefly before looking away. He wanted to ask her name, to understand who she was, but his voice wouldn't come as the massive doors of the hall closed. Behind them, Jack felt the full weight of the bond settle on him. He had survived the trial, but now he was bound to someone he didn't know, in a culture he didn't understand, and there was no way out. Jack walked through the dimly lit corridors of the alien palace with his new wife at his side, his mind heavy with confusion. He kept glancing at her, trying to find the right words, but none came. She was silent too, her soft glowing eyes looking forward, her face calm like still water. The glowing band that had bound their wrists together in the ceremony was gone now, but Jack could still feel it, a strange warmth deep in his chest that pulsed faintly like a second heartbeat to Alien. Attendants led them through a tall door into a large chamber. The room was elegant and quiet, lit by streams of soft blue light that poured from crystal veins running along the walls. A bed carved from a single piece of smooth black stone stood at the center, covered with layers of silken fabric. There was a table with strange fruit and drink and a balcony that overlooked the glowing alien city below. Jack stepped inside carefully. Feeling like a stranger who had entered someone else's life, one of the attendants spoke something softly to the young alien woman, then bowed and left the room. Jack and the woman were alone now. He stood awkwardly near the door, unsure if he should speak first. She turned to him slowly, her hands folded in front of her, and for the first time since the ceremony, she spoke in a voice so soft he almost missed it. "You Jack," she said, pronouncing his name carefully. Jack was surprised she even knew. He nodded. "Yes, Jack," he replied. "And you? What's your name?" She hesitated, then placed her hand lightly on her chest. "Lyra," she said. The name carried a soft rhythm like the sound of a song. "Lyra," Jack repeated, quietly. She gave a small nod and looked down, as if unsure what else to say. Jack took a deep breath. "Listen, I didn't know about this, about the marriage. I didn't choose this, and I'm guessing you didn't either." Lyra lifted her head slowly. She studied him with her glowing eyes for a long moment, then nodded once. She understood at least a little. Jack felt a sharp pang of guilt. He could see in her eyes that she was just as trapped as he was. He stepped closer, keeping his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not here to take anything from you. Whatever happens, I'll keep you safe." Lyra's expression softened for a brief moment. She took a slow step forward and whispered a word in her language.
Didn't understand it, but the way she said it soft.
Almost hopeful made him think it was Thanko suddenly. A loud crash echoed.
From outside the chamber, Jack spun toward the door, his instincts sharp. Lyra flinched and stepped back. He moved quickly to the balcony and peered into the city below. Far off in the shadows, he saw movement figures darting across rooftops, too fast and too deliberate. To be harmless, the door opened abruptly, and the warrior escort from before stepped inside, his armor glinting in the pale light. "Do not leave this chamber," he ordered sharply. "There may be those who do not wish the bond to stand." Jack frowned. Whispers of unrest. "Are you telling me someone wants us dead?" The warrior didn't answer directly. He placed a hand on the hilt of his blade and stepped back into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Jack's jaw tightened. He turned to Lyra, who was watching him quietly, her hands clasped nervously. He stepped closer. "Are there people here who don't want us to be? Married?" Lyra hesitated, then gave a slow nod. She pointed to the door and whispered a single word. Jack couldn't understand the language, but he didn't need to. Her eyes told him everything. Enemies. Jack ran a hand through his hair, pacing. He had just survived a deadly trial, and now this. He glanced at Lyra again, standing so still it was like she was afraid to move. Couldn't imagine what she had been through, how much pressure she lived under as the council leader's daughter. And now they were bound together by a tradition he barely understood. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "We'll be fine, Lyra, but we need to trust each other, all right?" She looked at him, her glowing eyes soft but unsure. After a moment, she nodded. The night passed slowly. Jack sat near the balcony, listening to the distant sounds of the city, his mind restless. Lyra sat quietly on the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. Every time their eyes met, he felt the strange warmth of the bond pulse faintly in his chest. And he wondered if she felt it too, just as the first pale light of morning touched the horizon. A sharp noise shattered the silence. The door burst open, and shadowy figures rushed in, their weapons drawn. Jack jumped to his feet, his instincts screaming. Lyra gasped and backed toward the bed. Jack grabbed the nearest object he could find, a heavy crystal bowl from the tableland. Swung it hard at the first intruder. The blow landed with a sickening crack, and the attacker crumpled to the ground. Another one lunged at him with a blade, and Jack ducked under the strike, ramming his shoulder into the figure's chest. "Lyra, run." Jack shouted, but she didn't. She stood frozen in fear, unable to move. Jack blocked another attack, barely dodging a blade that sliced across his arm, leaving a burning line of pain. Grabbed the attacker's wrist and twisted hard, forcing the weapon free. Suddenly, a loud metallic clash echoed from the hallway, and the warrior escort charged into the chamber, his blade flashing. In moments, the remaining intruders were cut down. Jack stood breathing hard, the stolen weapon shaking in his hands. As the warrior surveyed the bodies, "You were targeted," the warrior said sharply. "The bond has made enemies bold. This moment, you must be prepared for more." Jack looked at Lyra. She stood trembling, her wide glowing eyes locked on him. He crossed the room slowly and knelt in front of her, placing the weapon down. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you," he said softly. Lyra's lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. She only reached out and touched his hand lightly, the warmth of the bond flaring stronger for a brief moment. Jack felt it too, and for the first time since the ceremony, he believed it might mean something. The chamber still smelled of burnt energy from the weapons of the assassins. Jack sat on the edge of the stone bed, his head in his hands, while Lyra quietly cleaned the cut on his arm with a soft cloth. Her touch was gentle, and though her hands trembled, she did not pull away. Jack watched her glowing blue eyes focus on his wound, the faint bioluminescent lines on her cheeks pulsing softly in the dim light. "You don't have to do that," Jack said quietly. Lyra glanced up at him and shook her head slowly, whispering in her language. He didn't understand the words, but her tone was clear. She wanted to help. Jack sighed and let her continue. The warmth of the bond pulsed faintly in his chest again, almost like it was alive, and he wondered if she felt it too, the warrior. Escort entered the chamber suddenly, his heavy boots echoing on the polished floor. "They will try again," he said flatly. "The bond threatens their plans. Some see you as unworthy, an outsider who must be removed." Jack looked up frustrated. "Who are they? Who's trying to kill us?" The warrior did not answer right. Away he crossed the room and looked out the balcony, scanning the city. "Enemies of the council," he said at last, "and enemies of Lyra's bloodline. The marriage united powerful houses, and that unity makes them afraid." Jack clenched his fists. "Afraid enough to kill us." The warrior turned to him sharply. "You must not show weakness. You are bonded now, and to them, that means you carry Lyra's status as well. If they sense fear, you will not survive long." Jack looked at Lyra, who lowered her eyes. He hated the thought that she had grown up with this kind of threat around her, but now it was their reality together. He stood slowly, wincing as his wound stung. "So what do we do?" The warrior's gaze hardened. "You learn, you adapt, and you prove to everyone that you deserve the bond." Jack didn't like the sound of that, but he nodded. He knew he had no choice. The next days passed like a blur. Jack and Lyra were moved to a safer section of the palace, surrounded by guards at all hours. The council ordered that Jack be trained in alien customs and self-defense so he could stand alongside his new wife without appearing weak. He trained with the warrior escort each morning, learning how to fight with alien weapons and how to move like their warriors. The training was brutal, leaving him bruised and exhausted, but Jack pushed through it. He remembered the assassins in the dark and knew he had to be ready if they came again. Lyra stayed close, watching quietly as he learned. She was still reserved, her words soft and careful, but she had begun to teach him as well. She showed him how to greet others properly, how to read the glowing symbols on the walls, and how to wear the ceremonial robes without looking like an outsider. Sometimes, when Jack made a mistake and stumbled over a word, Lyra would smile softly, the corners of her lips lifting just enough to remind him that she was more than the quiet mask she wore one evening. After training, Jack returned to their chamber to find Lyra waiting by the balcony. She held a small fruit in her hands, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She approached him shyly and held it out. "For you," she said carefully in his language. Jack accepted it, surprised. "Thank you," he said, and took a bite. The fruit was sweet, unlike anything he had ever tasted, and he smiled. "It's good." Lyra's glowing eyes softened at his reaction. She reached out and touched the edge of his arm where the wound had healed, her fingers warm against his skin. "Strong," she whispered. Jack looked at her, his chest tightening. He didn't know what to say. He only nodded and said softly, "We'll both be strong." That night, as they sat together on the balcony watching the alien stars, Jack felt the bond between them grow stronger. It was no longer just a weight on his chest, it felt like a thread connecting their hearts. He didn't know if it was real emotion or just tradition, but he didn't care. It gave him hope that was soon tested. The next morning, a messenger from the council arrived, his face pale and nervous. "You have been summoned," he said quickly. "There is to be a gathering in the grand hall. You and Lyra must attend." Jack felt the tension return to his body. Gatherings meant judgment, and judgment meant danger. He glanced at Lyra, who stood straight and calm, though he could see the slight tremble in her hands. When they entered the grand hall, the same crowd that had witnessed their bond was already waiting. Whispers filled the air, and Jack could feel the weight of every gaze on him. He and Lyra were led to the center of the hall, standing beneath the glowing symbols on the floor. The council leader rose from the golden throne. "There are those," the warrior escort translated in a hushed tone, "who question your right to the bond. They will speak today." "You will answer." Jack's jaw tightened. This wasn't a trial by fire or a beast he could outsmart. This was something far more dangerous: politics, power, and tradition. One mistake could ruin everything. From the shadows stepped a tall alien with cold, piercing eyes, wore armor lined with red, and his presence alone silenced the hall. "Outsider has no place among us," he declared. "He is weak, unworthy, and he endangers the future of the Bond Gift's bloodline. I demand the council end this now." The hall erupted in whispers. Jack stood frozen for a moment, then felt Lyra's hand brushes lightly, as if to remind him he wasn't alone. He lifted his head and stepped forward. "I'm not leaving her," Jack said firmly, his voice echoing in the chamber. "If you think I'm unworthy, then prove it. But I will fight for her, no matter what it takes." The challenger's glowing eyes narrowed, and a deadly smile spread across his face. "Then you will fight indeed," he said. "Tomorrow at dawn? It's a duel that will decide everything." Jack felt the weight of the hall pressing down on him as the council leader raised the staff to seal the decision. He didn't know if he could win, but one thing was certain. If he lost, he and Lyra would be finished. The announcement of the duel spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. Everywhere Jack walked, he felt eyes on him, whispers chasing his steps. The halls that once felt cold now seemed hostile, filled with silent judgment.
At dawn.
Tomorrow, his fate and Lyra's would be decided by a single battle. Jack stood in the training hall late into the night, sweat dripping down his face as he swung a curved alien blade again and again. The warrior escort who had trained him. These past days circled him with a watchful gaze. "You are improving," the warrior said, "but the challenger is no ordinary opponent. He has led armies. He will not hold back." Jack wiped his brow, frustration boiling inside him. "I don't need to be the best," he said through gritted teeth. "I just need to win." The warrior stepped closer, his voice low and serious. "Winning may require more than skill. You will exploit every weakness you have, including your bond. If he believes you care for Lyra, he will use her against you." Jack froze. He knew the warrior was right. He thought of Lyra, her quiet strength, and the small moments of trust they had built. The bond that had once felt like a chain now felt like a lifeline. He couldn't let it be turned into a weapon against them. He trained until his muscles screamed, and his hands trembled from exhaustion. When he finally stumbled back to his chamber, the stars had shifted overhead. Lyra was waiting by the balcony, the soft glow of the city casting light across her face. She turned to him, her glowing blue eyes filled with worry she could no longer hide. "You fight," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly as she said the word in his language. Jack nodded, too tired to pretend he wasn't afraid. "I fight," he said softly. She stepped forward and touched his hand lightly, the warmth of the bond flaring between them. "Win," she whispered, the word sharp, almost a command. Jack looked at her and nodded again, feeling her faith settle. Deep in his chest, like a spark of strength, the dawn came too soon. The grand hall was filled to its edges with alien spectators. The air was thick with tension, and the glowing symbols on the floor pulsed with power. Jack stepped into the center, holding the curved blade the warrior had given him. Across from him stood the challenger, a towering alien clad in crimson-lined armor, his blade longer and heavier than Jack's. His glowing eyes were cold and confident. The council leader raised the staff high. "The duel begins," the warrior escort translated softly, standing at the edge of the arena. The challenger struck first, a blur of speed and power. Jack barely managed to block the first strike, the impact rattling his arms. The challenger pressed forward with relentless attacks, his blade flashing like lightning. Jack was forced backward, step by step, his boots scraping the glowing symbols on the floor. The crowd roared with every clash. Jack tried to stay focused, remembering his training, using his speed to dodge and counter when he could. But the challenger was stronger, faster, and more experienced. One heavy strike knocked Jack's blade aside, leaving a shallow cut across his shoulder. He stumbled but refused to fall. "You do not belong here," the challenger snarled, his voice echoing through the hall. "End this now, and I will grant you a clean death." Jack gritted his teeth and lunged forward, striking with all his strength. The challenger blocked easily and countered, sending Jack sprawling across the floor. Pain shot through his ribs as he struggled to rise. He heard Lyra's voice faintly over the crowd, a soft, desperate call of his name, and the warmth of the bond pulsed in his chest again. He pushed himself up, his vision blurring, and met the challenger's eyes. "I'm not leaving her," Jack said, his voice low but steady. "You'll have to kill me first," the challenger growled, and rushed forward for the final blow. Jack waited until the last possible second, then rolled to the side. The challenger's blade struck the floor, embedding in the glowing symbol. A surge of energy erupted from the ground, throwing the challenger off balance. Jack seized the opening, grabbing the hilt of his own blade and driving forward with all his strength. The blade pierced the challenger's armor, and the hall went silent. The alien staggered back, his glowing eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the floor. Jack stood over him, gasping for breath, his arms shaking from the effort. The council leader stepped forward, raising the staff high. "The duel is decided," the warrior escort translated. "The outsider is victorious." The hall erupted in chants. Jack looked around, dazed, as the weight of what he had done sank in. Then he felt a gentle hand on his arm and turned to see Lyra. She stood close, her eyes bright with relief. And for the first time she smiled fully. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He didn't know what came next, whether the enemies in the shadows would accept this outcome, or plan something worse, but for now he had one. He had kept Lyra safe. The council leader stepped closer and spoke again, their voice heavy with authority. "Your victory binds the bond fully," the warrior translated. "From this day forward, no one may question it. But be warned, our enemies will not rest. They will test you again," Jack nodded, gripping Lyra's hand tightly. "Then we'll be ready," he said, quietly, as they left the arena together. The warmth of the bond pulsed stronger than ever. Jack knew their fight was far from over, but he also knew he would not face it alone. The cheers from the grand hall still echoed faintly in Jack's ears as he and Lyra walked back through the massive palace corridors. The guards at every corner bowed their heads in acknowledgement now, but Jack could feel it behind the respectful gestures. There were still whispers. Some had accepted his victory, but others would never forgive it. Lyra walked close beside him, her hand clasped gently in his. She hadn't spoken since they left the hall, but her glowing blue eyes kept flicking toward him as if she wanted to say something. Jack gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. He wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but he wasn't sure if it was true. When they reached their chamber, Jack closed the door and leaned against it, finally letting the tension drain from his shoulders. Lyra stepped closer, her soft voice breaking the silence. "You, alive," she whispered in his language, the words heavy with relief. Jack nodded, giving her a tired smile. "Thanks to you," he said. "I didn't have something to fight for. I wouldn't have made it." Lyra hesitated, her glowing cheeks warming slightly. She reached up and touched the band of his arm where the bond had been sealed, the warmth pulsing between them as if the bond itself responded to her touch. She said softly. "We made it." Jack's chest tightened. He didn't realize how much he had needed to hear that. Later that night, the warrior escort came to their chamber, his armored footsteps echoing on the polished stone floor. "The council wishes to speak with you," he said sharply. "They are waiting." Jack frowned. "Another judgment?" The warrior shook his head. "No. But they will not wait long." Jack and Lyra followed him back to the grand hall. It's now empty except for the 7 council leaders seated on their golden thrones. Their glowing eyes watched silently as the pair approached. The central figure stood, raising the staff high. "You have proven yourself," the warrior translated in a low voice. "The bond is unchallenged. From this day, you will be recognized as one of us." Jack blinked in surprise. He had expected more resistance, more threats, but the council leader's voice carried no malice, only authority. "This palace, this city, and this world will be your home," the warrior continued. "But be warned, the enemies you faced will not vanish. They will wait for a moment of weakness." Jack straightened, his hand tightening around Lyra's. "Then they'll be waiting a long time," he said firmly. The council leader nodded once, satisfied, and returned to the throne. "Go build a future worthy of the bond." Jack and Lyra left the hall together, their steps lighter than when they had entered. Yet even as they returned to their chambers, Jack knew the warning was true. There were still dangers waiting in the shadows. But for the first time since he had arrived on this alien world, he didn't feel like he was walking into the unknown. A long days turned into weeks. Jack threw himself into learning the alien culture and traditions, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Lyra helped him, patiently teaching him the meaning behind the glowing symbols and the subtle customs of her people. Their bond deepened with every small moment, sharing meals, laughing softly when Jack stumbled through a difficult word, or simply sitting together on the balcony as the alien stars lit the sky one evening, as they watched the city glow softly. In the distance, Jack turned to her. "I thought the bond was just tradition at first," he admitted, "something forced on us. But now, I think I'm glad it happened." Lyra looked at him, her glowing eyes wide with surprise, then softening, with something warmer. She reached up and touched his cheek lightly. "Glad," she whispered, echoing his word. Jack covered her hand with his, smiling. "Yeah." Glad. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the warrior escort entering the chamber once again, but this time there was no tension in his voice. "The council has given you land beyond the city walls," he said. "A place to build a home, away from the palace. They want you to choose your own path." Jack looked at Lyra, who smiled softly. "Home," she said, testing the word in his language. Jack nodded. "Home," he repeated, and for the first time he felt like he meant it the following morning. Jack and Lyra stood outside the palace gates, watching as the twin suns rose slowly over the alien horizon. Behind them, the city shimmered with light, and before them stretched endless green plains dotted with strange glowing flowers. The warrior handed Jack a ceremonial staff, a symbol of his new place among the people. "This is where it begins," the warrior said. Jack glanced at Lyra, who stood close beside him. She reached for his hand and held it tightly, her glowing blue eyes filled with quiet determination. The bond pulsed between them, warm and strong, as if the entire universe had chosen this moment for them. Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward, leaving the palace behind. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever came, he and Lyra would face it together as they walked into the glowing horizon, hand in hand. Jack realized that the initiation he had once thought was just a formality had given him something far greater than survival. It had given him a purpose, a partner, and a life he could finally call his own. And this time he wasn't afraid.